Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm really very pleased to be here. I am really appreciative of all of you who came, and I'm here to talk about internal family systems coaching. And I'm going to refer to it as IFS from now on because internal family systems coaching is very hard to say. So here we go. And you can imagine that I have here a bunch of monsters because they, for me, represent parts. Raise your hand, if your electronic hand, if you've ever had that feeling that a part of you wanted to do one thing and the other part wanted to do something completely different. Jeff, Kate, Hanukkah, Steph, almost everybody. Thank you. Yeah, it's normal. And those of you who know about IFS, you get this. So this, what you're seeing on the screen, is basically what happens to me when I have to do a talk like this, especially if it's in person. A part of me wants to burst out onto the stage singing, being a star, and the other part just wants to run home and pull the covers over my head. And that's because humans are complex and we tend to feel many things at the same time. So today we're going to talk about what IFS is, how it works, how it can benefit us, how we can use it with teams, and why we would want to do that. And just a tiny sort of background. So IFS is based on the idea that the human psyche is a collection of semi-independent parts. In this model, the parts are all seen as having positive intent. That's really important here, that we do not seek to crush or get rid of parts. The parts are in us. Our goal is to find them and understand them and manage them. So they're seen as having positive intent, and the goal is to help them cooperate under the leadership of a wise, compassionate self. So we also have a core self, a self energy in IFS terminology. So this is our internal family system. It's the system that lives inside us, and it can be very rich. And I've had a number of people recently say, oh, you do family constellations. No, that's not what this is. This is something different. And it draws on some of the biggest schools of thought in psychology by Freud, Jung, Assagioli, Eric Berne. I'm sure you've heard of most of these, all of these. So our goals here are working with IFS. Some of the main goals are the following. Basically to discover and manage our own parts. In doing so, to free up more space for self energy, so that feeling of self, which we'll get into in more detail later, and ultimately to enhance our own emotional regulation, because that's really what this is all about, right? We want to get to the point where even if the parts are really activated and they're powerful, we don't want to behave them. We don't want to need that, right? We would like to be more in control. So we can see that it's coming up, but we don't have to raise our voice or shut down or, do what we do that disconnects us from other humans, that makes conversations more difficult, etc. So emotional regulation is really the prize here. Raise your hand again if you've seen Inside Out 1 or 2 or both. 1, 2, 3, 4. Awesome. Okay, it looks like basically everybody. Okay, so I don't know this for sure, but it's hard not to feel like somebody in Hollywood who produced this film, who wrote it or produced it, knew something about IFS, right? So this movie is a really great kind of dumbed down, fun version of IFS. You have the main character who has all these characters inside her head, and they make her do things, and they get upset, and they are often assigned to one emotion, which, as you may know, isn't always the case with actual parts. But it's a good thing to kind of think about. It's a simple representation of IFS. And now, so as not to violate anybody else's privacy, I've brought to you a sample of my own parts. And I met these parts in a real therapy session. I began training as a coach by going to see an actual IFS therapist because I figured that was the most efficient way. and I had a bunch of sessions, and I saw very vivid representations of parts. These are AI generated versions of my actual parts based on my prompts. So first we have the flustered manager girl. A flustered manager girl is extremely busy. She has lots and lots to do. She's very anxious. She's about 12. She has a big clipboard with a huge list of stuff she has to do on it and boxes next to it so she can check. She has a pen. She's very worried about all the stuff she has to get done. Some tasks depend on other tasks, and there are so many, and she's trying to figure out where to begin, etc., etc. She's sweating. Whew. So this is quite a strong manager part that I have. And this manager part really helps me get through the day. It helps me execute. It helps me to remember all the things I have to do. But when I get really blended with this part, when I stop understanding that this is only a part because the part is really activated, that's when I'm at risk of workaholicism and a little bit of burnout. So, flustered manager girl. In the middle, we have one of my favorites, the anger monster. So I have a really pretty strong anger monster. This guy is like a big gray cloud of noxious smoke. He's really strong. He's horrible. When I find somebody who triggers me and I have to deal with them somehow, he is likely to come and just appear very, very quickly like this. He just comes. And it's so quick that if I'm truly triggered, of course, he appears before I understand cognitively what is happening. And these are the moments when I raise my voice, or I get very tight and I stop speaking, or whatever, right? Whatever the reaction is. These parts that are like this anger monster, they have a direct line to the amygdala. This anger guy, he thinks that my survival is threatened when I get triggered like that, and that's why he appears. And he has a sidekick who's terrible, who sinks their hyena claws into whatever's happening and says, no, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. Great. Okay. The third one on the right is Makiko. Makiko's a little girl. She's about 7. She is absolutely stuck in her chair. She's depleted, exhausted, paralyzed. She is like this because she has one parent who's anxious and another parent who's depressed, and the two parents don't get along. And she's trying desperately to keep each parent going, to keep them happy. And no matter what she does for one parent, the other parent complains that they're not getting enough attention. So she is just absolutely down. And she's terrified that if one really gets unhappy with her, that they'll never, she won't get the love she needs unless she tries to keep both of them happy. Makiko. The reason her name is Japanese is because she actually came to me in a vision. These are all visuals that I've had of my parts. She came to me like a Japanese anime character. I have no idea why. I've never been to Japan, and I'm not a big consumer of anime. But it was very clear. And when I looked up what her name meant, I found these 3 things: beginning, truth, and child. And I was blown away. So these 3 parts belong to the main categories of parts in IFS: managers, firefighters, and exiles. And the managers and firefighters are in a common subgroup called the protectors. And we'll get to that. So the managers, as I said, these are the parts who push us, say, you got to do this, got to do that, don't forget about this. Okay, they keep you going during the day. They're there very often. They can be more intense or less intense. Managers. They're protecting us from being chaotic or not meeting our deadlines or things like that. The firefighters, they think our survival is at risk. They think there's a mega fire somewhere. They're the ones who come with a giant hose and they try to put out the fire. That's why they come so fast, because they just have one goal and that's it. And they don't care who we're talking to, who else is in the room, what the damage could be from their attempt to put out this fire. So, firefighters. And the final one is a really interesting one and a very key one, and those are the exiles. The exiles tend to be the younger parts, and what they all have in common is really strong vulnerability. The exiles are usually children who have felt all the really, painful emotions, deep shame, humiliation, loneliness and abandonment, fear, you know, the basic ones, the ones that are elemental to us as humans. So, why do we call them exiles? Because if they were close to the surface, if they were around with us all the time, if we felt them all the time, we would feel their very strong emotions. We would feel all that terrible shame and fear and whatever it is. And that would really make it hard for us to function, especially in the workplace. So we exile them to a deeper level of our psyche in order to survive and function on a daily basis without being overwhelmed by emotion. And by the way, Jeff is going to be watching the chat. So if you have important questions, we will sort of stop after certain sections to answer. So please feel free to put them in the chat. So now your host has very graciously agreed to do a demo with me. Jeff is going to play a client, and I'm going to help him, hopefully, see a part or two or feel something that has to do with parts. Okay. So, Jeff, would you like me to take down? I'll stop sharing, right? And we can just be on the screen. You're muted.
Put myself off mute. Yeah,
There we
sure.
go.
That
Okay.
yeah, that sounds great. Let me see if I can. Let's see if the multi-speaker view works, and we'll kind of go from there. But unless anybody else really wants to jump into the hot seat, I'm happy to. There's a part of me that wants to give it away to a Nick or to a Hanukkah, but no, I'm happy to. I'm usually on the other side, so this is good. Good for me.
So, Jeff, how are you doing today? 1 to 5,
One
least,
to five,
like worst to best.
worst to best. I'm a 4. Yeah.
Great. Okay. And as we're here, as you've welcomed all of our guests and I've launched into it, is there anything interesting coming up for you? Any feelings, memories?
Yeah, I think there's a curiosity part of me that's,
Mm-hmm.
familiarity with IFS, but not necessarily, haven't done any IFS specific counseling myself and or explored. I'm sure there's parts of me that would become more evident if I were to do that level of introspection, but I have like a theoretical relationship, I suppose, with IFS and less of a personal one. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a curiosity there about, yeah, about my own parts.
Okay. Can you identify any feelings in your body at this moment that you notice? Any tension, any warmth, anything stiff?
Probably a little bit of something in the stomach, a little bit of tension or something there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to invite you to put your hands on that part where you're feeling it, part of your body, and just breathe into it for a moment and just feel it. So those feelings in the body often represent parts. And so I'd like you to um, see if you can focus on that and let us know if you can identify it. Feel free to close your eyes if it's easier.
Yeah, I don't know what to call it,
It's
but
okay.
it's probably a not a manager part. I think my manager parts are probably my strongest, most evident parts. They're the ones that show up a lot. I do a lot of managing, and so it's probably a part of me that's, well, in this moment, is feeling vulnerable, given
Okay.
that I'm not in the facilitator seat. Um, so there's probably an empathetic part of me that's now empathizing with Steph and Alana and all the folks that I've put into this position in the hot seat. So, but there's like a vulnerability piece of not knowing, maybe not having the answers, not having um, clarity on a thing.
Okay. Great. So we have a vulnerability part that's present. Wonderful. If you close your eyes, do you have any visual of this part?
It's probably a 8-year-old Jeff.
Okay. Yeah. Ask this part, this 8-year-old Jeff, if it knows that you're there with it. And when you see that part, how do you feel towards it? You, Jeff, how do you feel towards this part of you?
Probably compassionate.
Mm. And can you ask the part what they want you to know about them? So, 8-year-old Jeff, what do you want to know about me? I mean, what do you want me to know about you? Excuse me.
I think that part wants to be okay with not having the answers, not necessarily knowing.
Mm-hmm. Wants to feel okay even when they don't know everything. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what would that part need from you now in this moment to feel okay?
Probably some grace. Grace is the word that comes to mind.
Some grace. That's nice. And what would grace look like?
Like being let off the hook for not knowing, or it being okay
Mm-hmm.
to just be and not have to have the answers, or yeah.
And now I have a funny question, or some people find it funny. Please ask the part how old he thinks you are.
He thinks I'm like late teenage or early adult.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. Hmm. Can you let him know that you're an adult now and that you are in control and that you're really happy that he's there, but he doesn't have to feel as vulnerable now because you're an adult?
Just breathe a little sigh of relief. So that's probably good. Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Okay. In closing, can you thank him? Show him some appreciation. Whatever he needs, if he needs a hug, can you just offer that to him? Let me know when you're okay to finish. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll say goodbye to that part. So Jeff, I'd like to ask you, when does this part come up for you in your work? Or does it? Do you are you conscious of it?
I'm that conscious,
Not that conscious?
not that conscious of the
Mm.
part. Not in in a work context. Yeah.
Okay. And does that physical feeling in your stomach come up during your work sometimes?
Not very often. It's probably why it caught me
Okay.
by surprise a little bit today. I was like, I'm not
Caught you by
usually in
surprise.
that feeling vulnerable kind of place in my work, which is maybe its own thing. Maybe I'm
Oh.
not pushing myself in ways that I could, or uh, yeah, just yeah, but interesting.
Hmm. Okay. That's wonderful that you were okay to share that with us. Thank you so much.
And
Yeah.
thanks for asking.
Yeah. Everybody, let's say thank you to Jeff. Wonderful. Okay. Whew. Okay. So, end of demo. Great. End of demo. Whew. So, how was that for Jeff, for you, Jeff, in general? How was it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely felt the vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
of being asked questions of a vulnerable part that honestly probably doesn't get asked those questions terribly often.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, on the one hand, felt like appreciate that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely, there was some vulnerability there.
Great. So, that's a piece of you that's there, 8-year-old Jeff. And you can check in with that part anytime when you think that you're feeling off. If you're feeling some of that hint of vulnerability, you can close your eyes and try to identify, try to see that part and say, hey, yo, I'm okay. You're okay. Right? I see you. And this is the muscle that we want to encourage. is the ability for people to say, oh, yeah, that's a part. Oh, that's another part. And that they can manage them for themselves, right? Rather than having to go to therapy all the time. It's great to have an IFS therapist or coach, but we also want to encourage sort of self sufficiency. My last question to you in debrief of this is, how is the stomach feeling for you now? Is it the same or different?
It's probably settled. Um,
Oh,
yeah.
wow, that's great. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Um, how are we doing on time? Let's see here. Yeah. So instead of what I was going to do, I'm going to ask everybody who's on to take a moment now, take 2 or 3 minutes, please, to write down any notes or impressions from this experience, especially to write down for yourselves what came up for you inside you. If there are parts that you can identify, write them down. This is it. Those of you who have not studied IFS, this is something that we do often. We map our own parts. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to do that now, because when somebody is gracious enough to be vulnerable with us, it can really bring up a lot of stuff. So I'm going to give you 2-3 minutes until 12:32. It's 1:32 Mountain Time, etc. All right. So IFS has a simple model. When you make it into a diagram, it looks like this. We have the three major categories of parts: managers, firefighters, and exiles. And in the middle, we have self. We have self and what IFS describes as self energy. And self is, can be challenging to describe. It's kind of like our core, where things are integrated, where we feel grounded. It's what happens to Riley when all her parts begin to collaborate in the Inside Out movies. Riley enters self energy, and she gets so much power and focus from that. For me, self energy is also kind of similar to getting into a flow state, right? When we're in flow, we feel calm. We feel like, we're fully focused on what we're doing. And our real goal is to manage our parts enough to be able to inhabit self energy more and more. And the way the adjectives are, sort of states that we use to describe self energy are the following: the 8 C's, which is part of the methodology. We feel calm, compassionate, courageous, curious, clear, connected, creative, and confident when we are in self energy. So, who wouldn't want to feel like this all the time, right? I don't know. Most of us would like to inhabit this. And we do on and off during the day. But, our daily lives are kind of this movie of us having moments of self energy, and then a part comes and disrupts it, and then somebody who triggers us appears and another part shows up, and all kinds of things happen in our rich interior all during the day. And so we want to get to a point where we can say, okay, parts, just, you're okay. Just step back. I need to inhabit my self energy now because I'm doing a session with someone, because I'm coaching someone. And coaches, this is key for those of you who are coaches. If you've studied IFS coaching, you know that coaches have to often during a session check on their own selves to make sure that they're as much in self energy as they can be. Because if a coach's part comes up in reaction to the client, then it can disrupt the coach's ability to listen. It can disrupt the coach's ability to hold space properly, to ask questions that are powerful, like any conventional coaching session, right? And the ICF methodology is similar, that coaches are supposed to have coaching presence. But the self energy, when we have a deeper understanding of what's happening in our internal system, Self energy is a more distinct concept than what ICF works with. And it's a beautiful concept. And next time you're in flow state, you may remember this and say, oh, maybe that was self energy.
Having just been on the receiving end of a little snippet of IFS coaching, felt awfully close to therapy. And so, where do
Mm-hmm.
you draw the distinctions and knowing that it's a therapeutic modality and lots of those things that migrate from the terrain of
Mm-hmm.
kind of psychology into more mainstream coaching? Where's that line for you, or how do you dance? How do you navigate
Yeah.
that line
Yeah,
with
it's a great
clients?
question. And it's an ongoing discussion. So, first, I want to say that I'm also ICF certified. Most coaches these days are ICF certified. And ICF draws a really clear line in that therapy is more about the past, coaching is more action oriented, moving forward. Coaches don't dig into people's pasts. Coaches need to understand when to refer somebody to a therapist. And that's all well and good. But in the meantime, ICF has embraced IFS, and they're providing continuing education credits for IFS training for coaches. And the idea is that the IFS coach holds space and sees what's there. I'm not going to, for example, I wouldn't push you to tell me, oh, you have an 8-year-old part. What happened when you were 8? Why was it, why is it 8? Right? What's important about that? Was there something with your parents? Is there something about how you were brought up? What is the trauma? Right? I'm not going to push you to go there. I'm going to help you witness your parts. And I'm going to be quiet a lot of the time. And it's possible that if you have a client who's, you know, not very stable and they do a really good job of masking it until you get into a coaching session with them, and things might even come up if you're not doing IFS in a session. If you feel that and it really doesn't feel comfortable for you, it's your job also in IFS to say, hey, I would invite you to look at going into therapy. Like you might like this is a situation that I'm not qualified to handle, and I might suggest that you find a therapist. So, all that being said, the IFS therapists are doing more of what I did with you, and the IFS coaches are encouraged, at least my experience in my training was that we were encouraged to do a slightly lighter version, to do conventional coaching, and I do executive coaching, so I'm going to speak from that lens, to do more conventional executive coaching. What are your challenges? What's coming up for you? People management, what are the types of people that you're struggling with? What can you name the emotions? Like we would do that normally in an ICF session, right? But when I hear a client speaking about, oh, I get so annoyed when this happens, or I get, really like I feel scared of this person. Those are parts. That's an annoyed part and a fearful part. And I may say to the client, oh, I hear that part of you is feeling annoyed. Can you say more about that? Right? Like I don't have to jump into a full demo with them because a lot of people are not ready, not willing to do that. It can be very vulnerable as we saw. So it's a big dance. It's a light mix, and it's really up to the coach to get um, to get enough experience to not dig into trauma unless, if the client is volunteering, if they say, well, I have trauma from this and this and this. Okay, but that's their cognitive talk. That's their analytical talk telling you, this is why I'm feeling like this because this happened and I know because I did this in therapy. Okay, that's fine. But the parts work is more emotional and somatic. And I'm sensing that I'm a little bit all over the place, but this practice is complex. But thanks
No,
for the question. Yeah.
no, I appreciate that. And there's people
Ah,
in this room that have been on the receiving end of group group facilitation from Jeff, and they've described it like group therapy. So I know that dance well.
yeah. And yeah. So and group therapy doesn't have to be like negative, like, ew, this is too woo woo for me, or this is terrible, or I felt too vulnerable. Yeah, but I have a question from Steph, please.
When you're doing this, how much time do you spend with the person on like exploration of the self, so to speak? So not necessarily the parts, but understanding how they identify the self.
Oh, that's a
I don't
great question. There isn't like a set way to identify self. What you can do is help them manage the parts and then observe as they do that, maybe over many sessions. Then you can observe their energy, right? Are they exhibiting some of those 8 C's that we went through? And ask the client, like, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Are you feeling like any calmer? Are you noticing any differences, right? And they may say, since I started doing this, I've noticed that I'm better in meetings. Like I can handle when things come up in meetings, or I've noticed that I don't dread that, difficult conversation that I have to have with somebody about their status or their behavior, right? And that's an indicator. And you can say to them, I mean, if they understand the concept of self and self energy, you can say to them, oh, that's great. But it sounds like, you have more space for self energy now, maybe than you used to before, right? But the self isn't like, it's not like a goal. It's not like a spoken target or goal of the session. Oh, another one. Okay. Hanukkah,
Just a quick
please.
question. So, like the flow state, is that or that the where you're like presenting with the 8 C's, is that like where you're organically gonna be when you're managing the other parts, or are you intentionally going there? Like I'm just wondering.
Oh, good question. Yeah, I don't, it strikes me that being in flow is really hard to call up and like do consciously. I
Mhm.
think I think we get into flow when we get focused on something that we like to do, and but it's much easier. I think what I was trying to say is that it's much easier to be in flow when the parts are calm, right? And in flow, we have self energy. It's there for us more than when we're trying to deal with a really intense manager part, or when we're really riled about something else. I mean, think about it. If you need to be in flow because you're preparing, you know, something for a meeting, or you're creating something, right? You're painting or whatever. If you have to be really focused on that thing, it's hard to focus when you have really activated parts, right? So, like, flow is the opposite of ruminating, and ruminating comes from being blended with parts that are activated and help making you behave. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, totally. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Great. Okay, I'm going to move on. Some fantastic questions. Thank you, everybody. So, how do we apply this to teams? Well, I'm experimenting with this and I wanted to share some stuff with you. So, for those of you who facilitate teams who do organizational development or leadership development, whatever it is, we can slowly, gently, playfully, with humor, try to introduce this concept to teams, preferably, and I want to put the emphasis on this, preferably when, say, at least the team lead has had some IFS informed coaching so that they kind of understand that, oh, I have some parts and everyone else has parts. Because these, exercises can bring up emotions, and the prize, right, is that your team, if you start doing this with them, they get to have a deeper connection with each other. And it builds all that good stuff, right? All the trust and all that, because we end up having basically more compassion for each other because we don't, right? We don't see ourselves as, oh, I'm angry, therefore I'm the nasty, angry one. That's my identity, right? No, it's just a part. We know that about ourselves, and then we can imagine it about other people. Oh, here's that part of Jeff that comes up when XYZ happens, right? So let's look into this a little more. So we're going to do a little role play here in breakout groups. Yeah, I'm just going to get rid of this. We're going to do a little role play. And the theme is a high stakes meeting, everyone's favorite. Pretend you're in a corporation. If you're an independent, pretend you're inside a corporation. If you work for a corporation, go for it. Okay. And I am going to ask you this question. If you can put in the chat just a couple of ideas. What are some familiar characters? Meaning, what are some stereotypical behaviors that you notice in the workplace with your colleagues or with any group of people? Stereotypical. That means like mono, like apart. Here's one. The person who hates change. Oh, something came up in the chat. Questioner. Cool. Okay. The person who's always full of questions. Or maybe that means that person is skeptical, Jeff. I don't know. So we have the questioner. We have the person who hates change, who really, really just dearly wants everything to be the way it's always been so that they don't have to deal with anything new and they just don't like this. It makes them really uncomfortable. The person who's stressed out all the time, every time you meet them, they say, oh my God, I'm so stressed. I have so much to do. And it's hard to find them in a calm place, right? They're never in that place, or hardly ever. The person who's hyper compliant. That's the person who will point out that you have violated a rule from 1985 and that you can't do that. You can see I love that part very much. The person who's always late to meetings, sometimes doesn't even show. That one brings up a lot in other people. Another one, defensive to feedback. Yes. Great. The person who can't deal with feedback, defensive. Okay. Here's another one. The brilliant know-it-all. They've read everything, they know everything, and they're going to make sure you know that they know. Doesn't like being vulnerable. Sure. Yeah. That's almost like a universal part, right? We don't like to be vulnerable, and we behave in all sorts of ways only to avoid feeling vulnerable. Another one, angry and grumpy. Some people just grumpy all the time. There's something underneath there. Nobody knows what it is. This person is unpleasant, and you just don't want to deal with them. Very competitive with peers. Okay, competitive. Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the brilliant know-it-all is also partly a competitive part. Superior and arrogant, right? No matter how much experience you have, how many degrees, doesn't matter if you're a peer to this person, they're always going to make you feel or try to make themselves feel that they're better than you. Makes jokes about everything. Thank you, Steph. That's the next one on my list too. The joker or distractor. Right. This person, no matter how serious the discussion, they have trouble dealing with energy in groups, so they're just going to come with jokes because that's their safe place. Okay, so I would invite you to take a picture of the screen, but also Jeff has a list of these, and keep in mind the other ones that you all brought up, the questioner, the one who's defensive and doesn't like feedback, etc. And we're going to do our little thing with this. Sorry, we're going to do our breakouts. So, Jeff, how many folks are on? What are we, like 8?
I've got 8, so I've got 2 groups of 4.
Two groups of 4. Fantastic. Okay. So here are your instructions. You're going to go into your breakouts for about 10 minutes, and you're going to have a high stakes meeting. I want each of you, please, to choose one of these stereotypical parts that we just looked at, that we just listed. Choose one, but don't reveal to the other folks which one you're playing. And I want you to play it fully, embody it, be outrageous, be extreme, be whatever, right? This is just a role play. And so what that means is that it may come up that there are 2 or more people in the group playing the same type, right? The same stereotype. Before you begin, please choose a leader. Maybe somebody will volunteer. That leader's job is to choose the theme of the meeting. What are you discussing? And figure out, what you want to come out of the meeting with. Like, what's the goal? You're going to come out with some suggestions or some one action item, doesn't matter. And that person should invite all the others to ask questions and speak up. And I put in a few suggested meeting things, but you can make up your own. You can do layoffs or the quarterly sales results or onboarding a new person or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. There's a little note down here just as an FYI that if you wanted to do this with an actual team, you could gamify it just a tiny bit. That for people who give really stellar performances in their parts, that they get a prize. So you would have some maybe a secret vote and then decide who played the best, who did the best job playing a part, and then provide them with a prize. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I see some smiles. I hope that means you had fun. So we were talking, Jeff and I were speculating on whether this was enough time or not enough time or too much time. Any comments on how much time you needed? It was good?
Meter,
Okay,
yes, thumbs
great.
up.
One thumbs up from Nick, from Alana, Michelle. Yeah, feel free to come off mute and just talk. We're going to have a plenary session now. Okay, great. All right, so how was that for you? Any adjectives you want to offer?
Real, frustrating.
Real
Okay.
frustrating. Is that one or is that two?
Real, comma,
Real.
frustrating.
Or maybe also real frustrating. Okay, great. I want to hear more about that in a minute. What else?
I picked a character that I wouldn't normally naturally be, and it was really hard to stay in character.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna
Okay.
say the same. Like I had picked something in my head, and when the situation came up, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to be this person.
It was
Okay.
uncomfortable,
Uncomfortable?
yeah,
Yeah.
to be something that I'm not and something that I actually really don't like. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And the lack of alignment too. We end up accepting but not agreeing on the outcomes. So
Mm-hmm. Perfect illustration, right? When we're all busy behaving apart, it's really hard to reach our goal as a team because we're probably triggering each other. What else?
It really illustrated how like messy it can get when people's parts are out of control.
Yes. Yes, it can get really messy. And I mean, the vast majority of us, we get out of control. Our parts get out of control. That is the reality. Nick said real, comma, frustrating. And that is the reality. And so this methodology can help us separate from the parts, understand intellectually and then also emotionally that that's just a part. And it opens the door a little bit to feeling, first of all, self compassion. Second of all, empathy for the other people in the room with us who are also behaving some part or other. Right? So, Nick, I wanted to ask you, can you elaborate on what was frustrating about that for you? If it's okay.
There's multiple dimensions. So, I mean, one is the internal frustration. I think I picked a archetype that I can imagine occupying, though maybe not that extreme. Um, it's not like I disidentified with it. It's like, yeah, I don't really do that, but I can imagine being in a setting in which I am just trying to keep the peace and being apologetic or like in order to feel like I want to keep the peace. That's kind of the part I chose, slash being late because I didn't turn my camera on for like a minute. Um, yeah, so I'm like I can imagine doing both of those things, but yeah, the frustrating part is watching myself occupy that and stay in that role. That
Mm-hmm.
was interesting. That was a little bit frustrating because then I noticed other parts that were coming up when I was playing that part, parts that wanted to shift or do something else, whether it was helpful or not.
Okay. Interesting.
And then the other frustrating aspect, so there was like the internal frustration with these dimensions, and then the other frustration is noticing what other people's archetypes brought up in me.
Uh-huh.
And then definitely like a lot of sensation um when there's like a methodical step-by-step part that comes out of someone, or we have to follow the rules or do it this way.
Hmm.
There's actually not a lot of compassion for that part in someone else, which, yeah, I just noticed that like the frustration of these like things that are often said in meetings, which is why it's real.
Hmm.
Like we always do it this way, we have to follow the process, the rules were made for a reason. Like these things are all too real.
Yeah, a lot of
Um,
tropes.
and how frustrating that is, and how there is actually in me probably a lack of compassion for that part in someone else.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Great. Really interesting. So, did any of you did any of you go far enough to think about what might be motivating those parts that other people are playing? Or did you wonder about it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think as I was being grumpy and disagreeing and indifferent, I was thinking about what experiences as somebody had that would lead them to be in this kind of meeting and feel indifferent about things. Yeah, that this likely isn't how somebody started out their career, as being grumpy and well, I mean, some people maybe, but grumpy and indifferent. But what experiences have they had that anything else hasn't been met with a good result? So they've shifted how they respond to things.
Yeah, right. And those people, right, there's something driving that, right? There's some mechanism. It's a part. It's not their full self. So there's something happening there. And if they knew that that was just a part, and they could say, oh yeah, oh God, it's the grumpy one again. Like they can begin to take a little more control over how they show up and also how the relationships go because people who are grumpy all the time have trouble, obviously, having, generative, trusting relationships in the workplace. Anybody whose behavior is regularly more extreme probably has issues. Um, okay. Anything else? What are you taking away from this little breakout session then?
I would, it just occurred to me to not take it personally all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're not confronting each other often. If we have the awareness, we're not confronting each other, we're confronting an issue. It's a totally different conversation then. And so to not take it personally and to be able to this is like lifting the veil on something really important. So you can see a little bit more clearly about why people are approaching things the way that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Might make it a little bit easier to kind of, to navigate.
Yeah, it gives us a kind of tool to help navigate the conversations and to help shift, as you're saying, if I'm interpreting you correctly, to help shift the energy away from the, oh, that part annoys me to, and back to the issue at hand. You know, I can take care of my parts, you take care of your parts, and then we can have space to deal with the problem, to co create, to collaborate, right? With less interference from the activated parts. Yeah, it lifts the veil. I love that. Okay, anything else before we move on? So these were some of the parts. So we're going to look, let's have a really quick look at this in a more analytical way. And the question is, since parts are usually protecting exiles inside, right? Somebody mentioned vulnerability. So the exiles are really vulnerable. Since the other parts are protecting those vulnerable exiles, what do we think, for example, this person who hates change is protecting that person from? So there's no right answer for these things because, our parts are ours and they're unique to us. But we can begin to think this way. We can speculate. So let's have a look at the first one, hate change. Why? Why does that person hate change? Well, here's a suggestion. Maybe the vulnerability there is just fear. Fear of feeling incompetent. Fear of being overwhelmed by having to learn a whole bunch of new stuff and shift the way they deal with things. And maybe they won't learn it quickly enough, etc., right? OOC, out of control. Fear of feeling out of control. Maybe the change comes too fast, right? You can, for sure, there are so many people feeling that way about all the AI developments that are happening in the companies, and announcing, okay, we're going to roll out AI, and everybody going, what does that mean, right? Okay. The Joker distractor. Somebody else brought this up. Do you want to take a crack at this? If you do, put it in the chat. What is this person protecting from? Or just go off mute, acknowledging their feelings. Yeah, sure. This person is not really crazy about feeling a lot of stuff. So, avoidance. So you nailed it. At least you nailed my interpretation. So avoidance, the emotions of others or of self, of their own emotions, are too much. They don't want to deal with it. They're not equipped to deal with it. They want to avoid. Maybe they have plenty of their own unresolved pain somewhere, right? But we're not going to push them to tell us about it because we're not therapists. Okay, the hyper-compliant person. Again, probably some fear or shame, right? They don't want to be disobedient. Obedience for them equals safety. And if they're obedient, they're going to get love, right? We're taught this in many organized religions. We are taught this as school children, and many of us have been parented this way. Michelle, self-deprecating to mask insecurity and fear of rejection. Is that for the Joker distractor?
It is.
Okay, great. Yes. Yes, thank you. Okay. The always late or no show. So this person is a really interesting case. A lot of times other people who are waiting on this person jump to the conclusion that this person has no respect, and they get upset with them. And I think that a lot of the time that's not the reason, but it doesn't, it could be, but it's usually something a little more complicated. So I like to speculate that this person has quite a bit of shame or anxiety about being in groups or being maybe social. Maybe they have social anxiety. Maybe they're worried about not being good enough, so they don't want to show up to that meeting. Maybe they haven't prepared because they haven't had time, or they have trouble focusing, right? They're convinced that they have nothing to contribute, that they're, I don't know anything, or I'm the loser, or, right? There are a lot of people who have low self-esteem. So these are some possible explanations. And the one who's brilliant and always has the solution, that person also is afraid of feeling ashamed that they don't know everything, because knowing begets love. And this is always when I remember an old boss of mine who basically used to quiz us on obscure technical facts, and we were the learning team, and I was like, why are you doing this to us? Because that's the way he grew up. And he said so. And he was really proud of knowing everything and of us not knowing. So, yeah. So this is a mindset that we can get into that, again, it adds to the empathy factor. Okay, this person is behaving in a way that triggers me, and instead of just getting triggered back and going, I hate this, I can't deal with this person is such a pain, they're wasting my time, blah, 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 blah. We can stop for a moment and think, oh, yeah, maybe that's just the part. And this is an extension of what you were commenting on before. Okay, so here's something concrete to do with the team. So you can do this role play and see how everybody feels about it, because it usually brings up a lot of stuff. It can be very funny because people play, real stereotypes. But it can also, remind us that, oh, wow, God, maybe I'm not as integrated as I thought I was, or whatever. And One of the ways to operationalize this IFS lens is to do it through language, to help your clients and the team people you're working with, the team members, or the group members if you're working with, others who are not in a corporate setting, to use part of me rather than saying I all the time. And I know it used to be use I statements, and now I'm telling you something different, but just bear with me here. So you're in a meeting, things are happening, and here's the first example. You're just unclear, right? Not feeling comfortable about a decision that seems to be being made, and you don't agree with it, or you don't feel like you have enough information. So you can say, part of me is really uncomfortable with this pivot. I think we need more data. So you're telling the rest of the people in the room, part of me is uncomfortable. You're not saying, I can't deal with this. I'm not making this decision until we have more data. You're saying, part of me is uncomfortable. I think we need more data, which is a lot lighter. It's a lot easier for other people to receive as a statement. Second one, part of me is feeling overwhelmed here. Could we take a moment? So you recognize that you have an overwhelmed part that really needs a bio break or just a moment to breathe because there's too much coming at them, too much info, too many emotions, whatever it is. And because this person recognizes this part of themselves, they're able to ask for what they need, and that is a break. Third one, part of me really isn't ready to take on this task yet, right? There's some talk in the meeting like, oh, we're going to do this, and the key task is X, and Janet's going to do that task. And Janet's going, what do you mean? I don't know what the task is yet. What? Okay, so I or whoever would say, part of me really isn't ready to take on this task yet. Could we discuss it in more detail? Because this is what happens in meetings. People make assumptions. Somebody starts in the middle of a thought or, right, doesn't give any context. And suddenly somebody ends up with a task that they don't feel prepared to handle. Right? So the point here is, what if we could speak for a part in a meeting rather than behaving it, which is what you did just now in the breakouts? All right. So why is IFS potentially really powerful, both for individual coaching and for teamwork? Because it touches on all three centers of our humanness: our intellectual power, our emotional lives and power, and our somatic. I'm sure you noticed that I asked Jeff to locate the part in his body and to breathe with it, to be with that part in the body with his hands on that part. So the body tells us so much, right? Especially with the firefighters. When that firefighter's on their way, you feel them, your body feels it before you even know what's happening. My stomach gets really tight when somebody triggers me, or I stick my head out, do whatever, right? We all do weird stuff. So IFS really works with all three of these. When you see a part and you have to identify it, you're working with your cognitive intellectual part of your brain. Then you feel the emotions when you make contact with a part. And throughout that, you've got the body also participating, exhibiting a part where there's pain or tension or heat or whatever. But a lot of times in most workplaces, the emphasis is on knowledge, intellectual prowess, skill to influence and debate, right? These are all cognitive. We're stuck in the intellectual paradigm because that's what's considered acceptable in most workplaces. When in fact, we all know that we bring our whole selves wherever we go. We can't unscrew. I always say, I cannot unscrew my amygdala and put it on the shelf before I go to work. I can't, even though I would like to. Okay, and although there's precious little research on IFS, which is, they're starting now. It's a real shame that they didn't do it earlier. It's been around for almost 40 years. But the speculation is that there's real neuroscience and neuroplasticity involved here in IFS. 3 points to be made here: that IFS can facilitate a shift from survival to processing, right? So when the firefighter shows up or the really strong manager shows up, or if the exile comes closer to the surface because the protectors are not able to handle it, we feel huge emotions and we feel that our survival is threatened. So IFS helps us with tools to process rather than feel completely overwhelmed and threatened. We can reduce overthinking and anxiety because we don't have to ruminate. We can talk to the ruminating part and say, yo, you need to chill a little bit. I see you. Thank you. I love you. I see you, but you don't need to push me this far. And it fosters internal harmony. It promotes better communication between the pieces of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical, rational, cognitive part, one of them, and the emotional centers, which are deeper and older. And it allows us to better reach more harmonious self-led states of self-energy. Okay, I told you there's not much research. There was one at a hospital in Massachusetts where rheumatoid arthritis patients reported being better able to manage their pain and feeling it less, feeling more in control about their pain after having IFS therapy. But that's one of the only things that's available. Again, just to review, our goals here by using an IFS lens when facilitating groups or practicing IFS-informed therapy is to help clients manage their parts. First identify them, obviously, but then manage them. Free up more space for self-energy so that they can show up with other people in a more calm, grounded, integrated state. And that calm, grounded, integrated state is proof of a higher level of emotional regulation. Here are some resources for you if you're interested in going deeper into IFS. The founder of the IFS methodology is Richard Schwartz out of Chicago. You can read anything by him. There are many, many YouTube videos that you can watch with him as well. I recommend starting with the book No Bad Parts because parts have positive intention and they all give us tons of info. Or if you're interested in neuroscience in that side of it, I really recommend this one podcast. There are many podcasts, so you can listen to a lot. But there's one podcast with a guest who is a neuroscientist who talks literally about how when she does MRIs on people and how when she thinks about the brain and when she practices IFS or reads about IFS, she can imagine the actual things that are happening in the brain, the actual reasons why the neuroplasticity is developed or grows, right? Develops during IFS. And she talks about it. Her name is Katja Vinik, and it's really interesting. And here's my email if you want to get in touch. QR code brings you to my LinkedIn profile. And I am going to stop there and give you deep gratitude for being here with me.